I remember every detail of that moment. The polished walnut conference table, the hush that fell over the room, the triumphant gleam in my brother's eyes. My father's voice, strong and steady, echoed off the walls as he declared his decision. Everything, our $600 million empire, painstakingly built over 20 years, would go to my brother. I stood there, rooted to the spot, my heart pounding, unable to believe the words that spilled from his lips. I'd been the one who spent countless nights poring over ledgers, forging deals, and shoring up the family business from near bankruptcy to unimaginable heights. Yet according to my father, my brother was the right successor. A polished, charismatic face for the future. A swirl of emotions battered me: anger, confusion, betrayal. Did he forget how we'd sweated side by side to close that first life-changing deal in Hong Kong? Did my father honestly think I was incapable of leading? Or was there some hidden motive I was too blindsided to see? I opened my mouth to protest, but no sound emerged. Every board member's gaze flicked between me and my father. He'd announced it so casually, as if handing away an old heirloom. My world tilted in that instant, and I couldn't catch my breath. Back in my apartment that evening, I barely recognized the face in the mirror. Drawn, hollow, consumed by the echo of my father's betrayal. My memories drifted to the early days, before money showered us in privilege and corporate lawyers hovered like bees in a hive. I was just a lanky teenager then, wearing hand-me-down suits that never quite fit. My father's eyes had always been so alive when he talked about business. He believed we could build an empire from nothing. And for a while, we did, together. When I was 19, he took me to meetings where I'd scribble notes on margins, absorbing every tip and tactic like a sponge. We scoured the city's underpriced properties and resold them for triple their value, forging the first stepping stones of our fortune. Now it all felt like a distant fairy tale. The father who once guided me through shady deals and midnight phone calls was the same man who dismissed me without a second thought. My phone buzzed with messages of concern from old colleagues, but I ignored them. Sleep was impossible. I lay awake, the betrayal strangling my chest like a vice, replaying his words until sunrise. The next morning, I arrived at the office only to be met with sympathetic stares from staff. People I had mentored, personally coached through the labyrinth of corporate negotiations, couldn't even meet my eyes. Some offered pained half-smiles, others pretended not to notice. My brother, on the other hand, strolled in like a conqueror, stepping onto new territory. He was quick to remove any trace of my leadership, from the desk I once occupied in the executive suite to the official documentation listing me as a partner. I tracked down my father in his private office, adrenaline fueling every step. "Why are you doing this?" I demanded. He offered a cool, measured explanation. My brother was better for public relations, more adaptable to the shifting climate of big business. He also claimed I was too attached to the old ways. My heart thrummed with anger. I wanted to shout that I'd driven the very strategies that made us unstoppable, that I'd innovated at every turn. But each time I tried to speak, my father silenced me with a dismissive wave of his hand. In that moment, I realized this wasn't a simple oversight. It was a deliberate choice, a line he'd drawn. And I was on the outside. That evening, I left the building feeling a dangerous surge of adrenaline ripped through me. Never in my life had I felt so belittled, so expendable in a world I helped create. The injustice of it boiled my blood. I holed up in a quiet cafe on the edge of the city, a place where I'd often escaped to think. Minutes turned to hours as I replayed the betrayal. I scribbled furiously on a napkin, notes, ideas, fragments of plans. If my father had shoved me aside, I would carve out my own future. Perhaps I could outmaneuver them both, proving once and for all who the real architect of our success was. Part of me wavered. Was I truly capable of revenge against my own family? But another part flared with conviction. I'd given everything. Now they'd left me with nothing. If that was how they wanted to play, I'd learn the rules and turn them against them. The more I scrawled my ideas, the more the spark ignited into a raging fire. It wasn't just about getting back what I was owed. It was about ensuring no one would ever question my worth again. It was time to take charge of my own destiny. Word spread quickly that I was no longer in line for the empire. I wasn't surprised when people began reaching out. former colleagues, industry rivals, even a few old college friends who had watched me hustle for every bit of success. In corporate circles, my reputation for tenacity was legendary, and some saw my ousting as a grave misstep by my father. One late evening, I met an old friend, Selena, for drinks in an exclusive lounge downtown. She had worked in corporate law for years, helping me refine our company contracts. She was furious to learn I'd been cast aside. She tapped her manicured nails on the table as she leaned forward. "The father you described to me, I never would have expected this from him," she said. "He's underestimating you." Next, I reconnected with Rob, a venture capitalist who believed in my instincts. He'd seen my skills firsthand when we negotiated a pivotal investment for our retail subsidiary. "You've got every intangible the market craves," he said, swirling his whiskey. "If you ever go solo, let me know. I'll be your first backer." My mind buzzed with possibility. Allies were surfacing, eager to stand with me. My father and brother might have the empire, but I had the talent and the loyalty of those who mattered. I was no fool. For years, I'd sat in the inner sanctum of the family business, privy to my father's most guarded secrets. I knew which assets were truly valuable, which shell companies held potential, and which board members were merely figureheads. I also knew the vulnerabilities, the small cracks that, if widened, could topple everything. As I combed through my old files late into the night, I recalled how meticulously we'd hidden certain assets offshore. My father had always bragged about our fail-safe plans, discreet accounts that made us untouchable in any financial storm. With my connections to the attorneys who helped set up these layers, I could do more than just rattle the cage. But there was a catch. I wanted to hurt the empire enough to prove a point, not destroy the livelihoods of innocent employees. That fine line between justice and destruction kept me awake, the glow of my laptop illuminating my tired face. Still, I was determined to use every piece of insider knowledge I had, every vulnerability in the fortress we'd built, to show them I wasn't just a child to be brushed aside. In business, information was power, and I intended to wield it masterfully. From what I heard through the grapevine, my brother was floundering. He'd been thrust into a role far beyond his skill set. Sure, he had charm and polish, but he lacked the grit and foresight that had been crucial to our firm's success. His first official move was a flashy acquisition, which he marketed as a game-changing expansion. On paper, it sounded impressive, but I knew the target company inside and out. It was a debt-ridden shell, propped up by inflated stock valuations. With no one around to warn him of the pitfalls, my brother dove headfirst into a financial quicksand. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. News of the acquisition circulated fast, and insiders whispered that it might turn toxic. Investors grew nervous. Some board members started to question if my brother had the chops to lead. My father, however, remained steadfastly supportive, insisting that it was just a rocky start. I wondered if he realized how precarious the situation was. The empire was teetering on the edge of risk they might not be able to absorb. But it wasn't my place to offer a rescue. They'd made it abundantly clear I had no seat at their table. Let them learn the hard way. With Selena's legal acumen and Rob's venture capital contacts, we began plotting the launch of my own firm. I wanted to offer innovative solutions, private equity with a twist, focusing on sustainable tech and real estate. I couldn't pretend the timing wasn't partly fueled by anger, but it was also about proving that I had vision, that I could rise beyond my father's shadow. We rented a small industrial chic space in the heart of downtown. It was a far cry from the luxurious offices I once walked through daily, but it felt refreshing to build something from scratch on my own terms. My heart pounded with a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in years. Late nights turned into early mornings as we hammered out business models, negotiated seed funding, and mapped strategic targets. The burn in my muscles from sleep deprivation felt strangely exhilarating. With every new plan or connection we secured, I felt the momentum building beneath me, but the ghost of my father's disappointment still haunted me. Sometimes in the quiet hours, I'd remember the pride in his eyes when I closed our first big deal years ago. Now I was forging a path without him, determined to outdo the empire he'd stolen from me. Through former colleagues still sympathetic to my cause, I heard rumors of discord at the family headquarters. My brother's acquisition was unraveling faster than anticipated, with lawsuits looming and certain projects over budget. Investors were starting to see the cracks. Yet my father, ever the old-school patriarch, refused to see the danger. He believed wholeheartedly in our name, in the empire he'd sculpted. In his mind, brand loyalty would keep the ship afloat, no matter how rough the seas. He dismissed warnings from seasoned analysts and fired anyone who dared question his son's capability. I pictured him strolling through the offices like a king surveying his domain, ignoring the uneasy stares of staff. Perhaps his pride wouldn't let him admit he'd made a colossal error. Maybe he was clinging to some romantic notion of the business as a father-to-son legacy. Meanwhile, I quietly perfected my own operation. Every new hire I made, some of whom left my father's firm for mine, filled me with a rush of vindication. I was no longer just the banished heir. I was an emerging competitor. My father might turn a blind eye now, but soon enough, he'd be forced to recognize the threat I posed. It happened on a Thursday morning. I awoke to headlines splashed across every major financial news outlet. Underperforming acquisition rocks the Lawson empire. The so-called game-changer my brother had bought was in freefall, with scandalous internal documents leaked to the press. Commentators questioned my brother's judgment. They wondered aloud how a company as reputable as ours could make such a disastrous move. My phone buzzed incessantly with texts, emails, and calls from acquaintances asking for my take. Part of me wanted to crow about how obvious this disaster had been, but I kept my responses curt and polite. At the heart of this fiasco was the revelation that the acquired firm had fudged its numbers, inflating value to secure a higher buyout. My brother, lackluster in due diligence, never caught it. Under normal circumstances, we would have done extensive research, employing specialists to investigate every corner of the target's finances. But my brother, hungry for a flashy headline, had rushed the deal. Publicly, my father stood by him, but behind the scenes, I knew panic was setting in. The empire's stock dipped. Rumors circulated about internal power struggles. I watched from a distance, both fascinated and horrified as the cracks widened into chasms. With the family business reeling, I pitched my new firm to a syndicate of private investors, meticulously outlining how we'd capitalize on sustainable technology ventures. My presentation drew upon the lessons I'd learned from building the original empire. Only this time, I was the sole visionary. Rob coordinated a meeting at a posh penthouse suite where I could showcase the strategic roadmap. I walked in, nerves tingling, determined to prove I was more than just an exiled heir. The investors were intrigued by my track record. They asked probing questions about market risks, exit strategies, and the scope of my ambition. I answered confidently, detailing how we'd leverage partnerships with emerging startups to gain influence before scaling. I promised transparency and a meticulous approach to due diligence, a pointed reference to the fiasco tarnishing my father's brand. The room fell silent as they conferred in hushed tones. Then, the lead investor rose with a reserved smile. "We'd be honored to back you," he said, handing me a thick folder containing the terms. My heart soared. It was official. I had secured a major round of funding. Suddenly, my position was no longer hypothetical. I was in the game for real, and ready to play to win. Word of my success spread faster than I expected. People within my father's company began reaching out, cautiously at first, testing the waters. After seeing their departments mishandled and budgets slashed, they longed for leadership that respected their expertise. I had to tread carefully. I didn't want to decimate the entire staff my father and I had once nurtured. Some of them were like family to me. But there were a few star players, individuals whose brilliance was being wasted in the chaotic environment my brother created. One by one, they came to me, hungry for a fresh start. The quiet exodus began. I offered them not just competitive salaries, but the promise of professional freedom. They would no longer be cogs in a massive machine. They'd be pioneers shaping a new vision. Selena ensured all contract negotiations were airtight to avoid legal battles, and I worked hard to welcome each new team member personally, remembering the birthdays and dreams I'd learned about over the years. In the old days, when my father and I were in sync, we'd done the same, valuing people as our most important resource. Now, I was reclaiming that ethos. And with each high-caliber addition, My new firm's reputation grew, while the cracks in my father's empire deepened. A rare, quiet moment found me sifting through a dusty box of old photographs. Most showed me as a kid standing proudly beside my father, both of us grinning ear to ear. He'd always ruffle my hair in front of the camera, saying, "We're going to conquer the world, kiddo." That memory tugged at my heart. Before wealth complicated things, my father was my hero. He used to buy me ice cream after every small victory, a new contract signed or a bank loan secured. We'd sit on the hood of his beat-up car, celebrating like we'd just closed $1 million deal. My mother had died when I was young, and perhaps that had forged an even tighter bond between us. Building the business was our shared dream, a way to fill the void left behind. As we expanded, my father and I had become an unbreakable duo. Or so I thought. Staring at those photos, I questioned how it had come to this. Why would he reward my brother, a man who'd done so little to earn it, with what we'd built together? The pang in my chest grew sharper. For a fleeting moment, I wondered if I'd ever truly known him at all. One afternoon, I received an unexpected phone call, my father. Even hearing his voice was enough to set my pulse racing. Against my better judgment, I answered. He asked for a meeting. A part of me hoped it was an olive branch, some overdue admission that he'd made a grave mistake. I agreed to meet him at a discreet cafe by the waterfront, a neutral location. When I arrived, he was already seated, looking tired. Lines that I hadn't noticed before etched his face. For a moment, compassion washed over me. Then I remembered how callously he had brushed me aside. "I want to talk this through," he began, swirling his coffee. He insisted he'd never intended for me to be cut out entirely. My brother's leadership was just a temporary handover. I laughed, bitterness dripping from each syllable. He must have felt the tension, because he reached across the table only to have me pull my hand away. My father mentioned the scandal rocking the business, fishing for my willingness to come back and help. "I'm doing fine on my own," I replied, voice steady. I stood up, leaving him at the table, regret shadowing his gaze. The time for polite gestures had passed. Fueled by the memory of that hollow conversation, I poured every ounce of energy into my new company. The board I'd assembled was small but sharp, each member dedicated to moving quickly on profitable opportunities. We began targeting the very sectors where my father's empire had once thrived: real estate, resource management, and boutique acquisitions with high-impact returns. We systematically identified weakened segments in my father's portfolio, units weighed down by my brother's mismanagement. Then we launched strategic offers to their competitors, forging alliances that indirectly chipped away at the empire's hold on the market. It was a cutthroat tactic, but no more ruthless than what they had done to me. Meanwhile, headlines continued to feature my brother's blunders: a miscalculated expansion into a foreign market, a tarnished partnership that dissolved overnight. Investors who once sang praises of the Lawson name now questioned its viability under my brother's watch. All the while, my father stubbornly refused to remove him, clinging to a misguided sense of loyalty. Every success my firm notched felt like a personal victory. We became the talk of the industry, an upstart challenger with the resilience and insight only someone who once built a behemoth could have. And I made sure my father noticed every move I made. The morning light fell across my desk as I scanned the financial headlines. Two major articles painted a stark picture. One highlighted my firm's meteoric rise. Former Lawson heir disrupts market with bold ventures. The other lambasted my father's empire for its continuing downward spiral. Lawson Holdings in crisis, leadership questioned. Television pundits started drawing comparisons, pointing out that the synergy once fueling the Lawson empire was now split into a destructive rivalry. My phone erupted with interview requests, and reporters camped outside our building, hoping to catch a soundbite. For the first time since my exile, the narrative began shifting in my favor. I tried to stay focused on the work itself, securing deals and bolstering the new brand I was creating. But every so often I'd catch a glimpse of a headline or overhear a conversation in the elevator, and a sense of grim satisfaction settled in my chest. The father who'd once been so proud of our name now found himself on the defensive. My brother, once the anointed prince, was floundering under the spotlight. The empire's value plummeted with each passing day. All the while, people buzzed about me, the underdog turned corporate contender. Revenge had never tasted so heady. It happened sooner than expected. A single phone call from my father, his tone hollow with desperation. "I need your help," he admitted, voice rasping with regret. Rumor had it key investors were threatening to pull out, citing my brother's incompetent leadership. My father had run out of quick fixes. A strange mix of emotions churned inside me. For years I'd looked up to this man, devoting myself to the dream we built together. And now he was reduced to begging for my return. Part of me relished his desperation. Another part was tempted to see if I could salvage what we once had. We arranged a discreet meeting in the empty dining room of a lavish hotel. The lights glinted off gold-trimmed mirrors, making the atmosphere almost oppressive. My father arrived looking pale, shoulders slumped. As he spoke, his voice trembled. "We're facing a potential collapse," he confessed. He wanted me to come back, to join forces in preventing total ruin. I said nothing at first, my face unreadable. Memories of late nights and shared victories flickered through my mind. But so did the fresh sting of betrayal. My father watched me with pleading eyes, clearly bracing for my answer. For once, I had the upper hand, and he knew it. After our meeting, I couldn't sleep. My father's haunting plea echoed in my mind. Beneath the cool veneer I'd perfected, an inner conflict raged. Was I so bent on revenge that I'd watch the entire empire collapse, taking down employees and families who depended on it? As a child, I always believed blood was thicker than water. But the events of the past weeks had dismantled that notion. Father and son had discarded me so easily. And yet there remained a flicker of loyalty. Perhaps misguided, but alive nonetheless. Selena urged caution. "He's desperate. Don't let him manipulate you into saving something that cast you aside," she warned. Rob echoed similar sentiments. He didn't want my new firm to risk becoming overshadowed by the Lawson brand. Late in the night, I took a drive through the old neighborhoods where my father and I had first invested. I passed shuttered storefronts that once held our earliest ventures, recalling the pride on my father's face when we flipped them for a profit. The question gnawed at me. Was I still that person, eager to share triumphs with my father? Or had I become someone who'd stand back and watch them suffer? Morning dawned, but the answer still eluded me. Ultimately, I decided I wouldn't just sit idle, but I wouldn't hand over my loyalty again either. If I were to intervene, it would be on my terms. The next day, I laid out a plan. My father would cede controlling interest of the empire to me in exchange for the bailout and strategic overhaul we both knew was necessary. There would be no illusions, no empty titles or shared reign. If he wanted my help, he had to accept the cost. To enforce this, Selena and I crafted ironclad legal documents. Rob connected me with additional investors willing to back a takeover, eager to step in once my father signed on the dotted line. My father balked at the conditions, but he couldn't deny the reality. Either sign or watch everything crash. Meanwhile, my brother raged. He saw the writing on the wall that he was about to lose everything he never truly earned. He tried to sabotage deals and spread rumors that I was power-hungry. But with the media's scrutiny already on him, few believed his rants. By the end of the week, my father reluctantly placed a trembling signature on our agreement. The final piece of my plan locked into place. My father and brother had no idea just how decisive this next move would be. With the paperwork secured, I orchestrated a stunning acquisition that would merge my new firm with the Lawson Empire. On my terms. No one outside our tight circle knew the details until I went public at a press conference, standing behind a podium with cameras flashing in my eyes. My prepared statement was brief but powerful. Effective immediately, I'll be taking over strategic operations of Lawson Holdings, I announced, detailing how my firm's innovative approach would integrate with the empire's existing infrastructure. The room erupted with questions, flashes, and thunderous chatter. Some older investors were livid, accusing me of a hostile takeover. Others praised me, seeing this move as the breath of fresh air the empire needed. My brother, now essentially dethroned, burst into the conference mid-session, shouting at reporters that I was stealing what wasn't mine. His outburst only confirmed the media's suspicions of chaos within the empire. When the conference ended, I locked myself in a private suite upstairs. Adrenaline coursed through my veins, but so did a swirl of emotions. Triumph, fear, and a pang of sadness for what might never be salvaged between me and my father. Still, I pressed forward. There was no turning back now. Over the next few days, investors watched in a stunned daze as the empire's structure was dismantled. Entire departments were shut down or restructured to fit my new company's ethos. My father's cronies, those who had always gone along with his every whim, found themselves suddenly unemployed or reassigned. On social media, employees posted emotional farewells to the old guard. Some celebrated the changes, expressing relief that genuine leadership was finally taking the reins. Others mourned the downfall of a name that once symbolized industry might. My brother tried to rally supporters, but the momentum wasn't on his side. Most people saw him as the cause of the empire's failures rather than its savior. His tantrums at board meetings, where I now presided, only sealed his fate. Eventually, I escorted him out, flanked by security, as he spat threats of revenge that rang hollow. That night, looking down from my new office, a corner suite with a panoramic view, I felt the weight of how much I'd both destroyed and created. The Lawson Empire in its old form was gone. In its place stood a leaner, more cutting-edge version, my vision. The empire my father cherished had been undone by his own choice, and I was left holding the pieces. I expected my father to show up eventually, but not in the dead of night. My office door swung open to reveal him standing there, eyes glassy, breath unsteady. He looked around, taking in the unfamiliar decor and the staff badges labeled under my new firm's name. He leveled a resigned stare at me. "Everything we built, it's vanished," he said. His tone wasn't accusatory this time, it was tinged with sorrow. He understood I had brought the downfall, but also that I was the only one holding any chance of survival in this new incarnation. I leaned back in my chair, trying to quell the tumult inside. Part of me wanted to scream that he had forced my hand, that he had given me no other choice. Yet another part longed to find some path back to the father I once admired. He took a shaky step forward. "Is there really no going back?" he asked softly. I felt my resolve tighten. "Not to what we had," I replied. I kept my voice firm but not cruel. The silence stretched between us, weighed down by everything we'd lost. After a moment, he just nodded, turned, and walked away. I closed my eyes, struggling to steady my heartbeat. There was no turning back, indeed. In the weeks that followed, my team and I wasted no time in rebuilding. We merged the best of the old empire, its seasoned staff, its profitable divisions, with the nimble strategies my new firm championed. The result was a powerhouse that gobbled up market share as if it were starved for it. Investors who had doubted my leadership now sent congratulatory messages. Client after client renewed and expanded contracts, drawn by our fresh approach. Financial magazines ran cover stories proclaiming me as the next big industry magnate, a visionary who had risen from obscurity to dominate the field. My father retreated from public view. My brother, stripped of any significant role, seethed in the sidelines. On occasion, I'd hear rumors that he was plotting some desperate comeback or that he'd left the country to lick his wounds. I didn't care enough to chase the details. Looking out at the city skyline from my penthouse suite, I felt a pang of bitterness. Success had come at a cost. My last illusions about family unity lay shattered. Yet I also felt an unwavering sense of pride. I had proven my worth without the crutch of paternal approval, guiding a new empire that now outshone the old one in every possible way. Late at night, I found myself alone in a quiet office, the hum of the city muffled by thick glass. A single lamp lit the stack of documents on my desk: earnings reports, partnership agreements, future expansion blueprints. My success was undeniable. No one could question my capability now. Yet the victory felt bittersweet. I'd sacrificed the closeness I once had with my father, something irreparable. All my life, I'd worshipped his guiding voice, his unwavering ambition. Now we spoke only through mediators and terse emails. Sometimes I wondered whether there was a shred of regret in him for turning his back on me. I also questioned whether the relentless pursuit of power would inevitably isolate me from the few true relationships I had left. I remembered simpler times, before we had money, when all it took was a shared meal to bring us happiness. But in this world of big deals and corporate warfare, things were rarely that simple. Still, I couldn't deny who I'd become. I was the architect of my own destiny now, forging a path where even my father had stumbled. If there was a price to pay for standing at the pinnacle, I would pay it. Because in the end, my ambition had carried me farther than any broken promises ever could. Not long after, I hosted a gala to celebrate the official launch of our newly consolidated firm. The city's elite gathered in a luxurious ballroom shimmering with chandeliers and polished marble floors. I arrived feeling both pride and a lingering sense of awe at how much had changed in such a short time. As I moved through the crowd, offering gracious welcomes and accepting compliments, I spotted my father and brother entering together. They looked strangely subdued, out of place amidst my success. At one point, our eyes met. My father gave a small nod, a fragile acknowledgement of what I'd accomplished. My brother, eyes downcast, said nothing. The night was a resounding success, a testament to the empire I had reclaimed and reinvented. Investors, media, and celebrities mingled, singing praises of the firm's future. In my speech, I thanked those who believed in me when others didn't. I spoke of resilience, of forging opportunities from adversity. The next morning's headlines declared the event a triumph, lauding me as the one who built it all again. My father and brother faded into the background of that narrative. In that moment, I realized the magnitude of what had happened, the final validation that my worth was never conditional, and the empire now stood firmly in my own hands.